it's delightful to be here among so many friends and for such good reasons. And such an important conversation. And so delighted that I have an opportunity always, whenever I can, to partner with former Governor Bob McDonnell. Bob does a lot of great things. Governor McDonnell has made a lot of great things happen for the Commonwealth of Virginia, one of which was related to higher education. He put a lot of time into it. He and I started at around the same time, and it was a real blessing, honestly, to begin with him at the same time, because we had a lot of opportunity. And I think in so many ways, VCU is that future and represents, I was just talking about our new freshman class, and I met with a small group of them, and I said, you are what America is. You very much look like America, and delighted that we are a part of that. And I also know that on the program today, you'll have former speaker, Kirk Cox, and Kirk has been another great partner. We were on a board together where we had a chance to be together, and Kirk has been very involved in VCU and has had a lot to do with a lot of the success that we've enjoyed in higher education generally. Another believer in higher education and understands the foundation that we have. And then as he sits there next to my dear friend, Delegate Dolores McQuinn, love working with you. There is probably no one more positive in the world than Dolores. And I always want to spend more time with her so I can get more and more positive myself. And Dietra, one of our graduates, Dietra Trent, I'm delighted that you are here with us. She's a VCU graduate. I'm so proud of you and everything that you're doing to create so many opportunities for so many people in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and really the nation, given your role. So we're really proud of you and grateful for everything that you have made happen and continue to make happen. And Barry, I always enjoy working with you, and we have a personal relationship as well that I have enjoyed with you, and delighted that you are here today. And Jim Dyke, I'm so glad that you're here as well. You've done so much for our state, and we're very, very grateful. And I believe there may be a couple of representatives from Governor Youngkin's team here as well. If they are, maybe they're on their way, and I welcome them as well. This legislature and this governor every governor we've had, honestly, has been fantastic to work with, and I have to say the same of every legislature, and that shows in this institution. So listen, this is about focusing on the importance of the decision, Brown versus Board of Education, a case that formally ended segregation in our schools and really has an enormous impact on businesses. And I think it's important that we focus on the ways in which that plays out. But I think it's important to note all of the ways in which that important decision then had implications for the ways in which we all live together. And that is critical, because that is where we are. You know, it's an interesting conversation that we're having today among a lot of the elections and such. These interesting arguments about whether we are this or are that. Or the fact of the matter is we are who we are. And America does represent all of the different kinds of people who we enjoy being today. And that really brings us tremendous strength. And we need to embrace all human beings in every way we can, and certainly all Americans. And you'll see more of that. VCU in so many ways is really a microcosm of what America is and where we're headed. When you think about all of the missions of this complex institution, education, community outreach and service, our research agenda, our healthcare agenda, it's all really focused pretty much on dealing with the needs of all human beings, and certainly all Virginians. That's really our mission, and we're very proud of that. We're very proud of saying that VCU really needs to be a truly public university. When these institutions were created many years ago, there were ideals about what public would mean. And a lot of our institutions tended to get away from that and think about trying to compete with private institutions and such. And we really need to focus more on how we're going to include people in this great mission and give everybody a chance to succeed and be a part of the American dream. That's what really will strengthen the United States of America, and certainly the Commonwealth of Virginia as a key state in the United States of America. So now I have the privilege and honor of introducing to you Virginia's 71st governor, who very much understood what he was doing as governor. And on top of all the great things that he does now, including his work in law, consulting, and business development, he's on multiple charitable boards and foundations, and I know from talking with others on those boards that he's a tremendous contributor. I can tell you from working with him, he's one of the most creative and thoughtful people I have ever worked with. And he's also now the proud grandfather of, is it 7? 8 grandchildren. And of course, Bob, we want to meet all of them so that when it comes time, we talk to them about coming to VCU. But on top of, and most important thing to say about former Governor Bob McDonnell is that he's just really a very good person. Yeah. And what he puts his time into is the advancement of human beings everywhere and all human beings. He's absolutely a humanitarian. And I have loved working with him. It's been my honor. And I'm so glad that you chose VCU for this wonderful venue and this venue for this wonderful program. So, Bob, please come forward.
Well, thank you very much, President Rao, and thank you for hosting us here at Virginia Commonwealth University, the largest public university now in Virginia. It's really the university for every person of all stripes, almost 40,000 undergraduate, graduate, and so many unique programs. Some of the different things that have been started here are ones that are either unique to VCU or ones that have been emulated by other programs around the country. Of course, when you have 5 kids, you have graduates everywhere, so I do have a VCU graduate in criminal justice, and she just had such a great experience here. I'm so glad to be with my friend Dolores McQuinn. I've gotten to know and love over these many years. We served together when I was governor. She was in the General Assembly working on some of these racial justice and other issues, economic development issues, and decided a couple of years ago to found a group on racial reconciliation. We've worked together on the Richmond Slave Trail and on the vision for a museum, a National Slavery and Reconciliation Museum in Shakobad. Well, just a little slower and evolving than I might have thought, but she is a terrific person and leader, and we decided in 2018, in honor of the 2019 commemoration of the first Africans coming to Fort Monroe, Virginia, enslaved, then on to Jamestown, and so began the abomination of enslavement. The capital, which became right down the road at Shakobad, with Lumpkin's jail. And so we became friends, founded the organization, and so began the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, is to get people to talk civilly about these important, emotional, but issues that have to be talked about here in the United States of America. We looked at the fact that, by 2043, this is a majority non-white nation at the current birth and death rate. So we better find a way, black, white, brown, Republican, Democrat, to start finding better ways to get along and love each other and find out how to bridge the gap with our differences. And so began Virginians for Reconciliation. And so it's a group of people of all those various stripes, but mostly people that are in leadership positions in law and business and government, in the church, synagogue, mosque, and education, and in arts and culture. Those are the ones that so influence other people in society. We figured if we could make some headway in changing those hearts and minds that would kind of permeate society. That's been the goal. And with some of the things that have happened in our nation in the last few years have helped to focus on the issue, but in some ways have made the dialogue a little bit harder. So much of it's been trying to be resolved in the political sphere. I think most of us of goodwill know ultimately it's about building relationships, getting out of your comfort zone, being honest about the history, but also about the progress, and then see if you can find the middle ground even if you don't agree on some philosophical issues, and that's been the endeavor. So thank you, Dolores, for being such a great leader and a great partner along the way, and I've really loved working with you. So one of the things the one reason we're here today is one of the things that the board thought about is what better way to begin an honest dialogue about education than to look at what happened in this country 70 years ago. Now I won't speak Dolores' age, but I'll tell you, she and I were born the same year, and Dolores has informed me that we were born 70 years ago. She's told me I was a brown baby. I never knew that. So she's educated me a lot already. And we thought it would be really good. Take this 70-year look back and how bad it was with massive resistance right here in Virginia soil, maybe the worst. Here with our governor saying, agreeing with the people in Farmville and other places where Barbara Johns walked out of that school. That's the other thing, is this was a companion case, the Davis versus Prince Edward County Board of Supervisors, that case with Barbara Johns leading the walkout in Oliver Hill and Henry Marsh helping to represent her in the United States Supreme Court. That was part of that decision that made history and literally changed 300 plus really bad years about the way that people were treated in schools and in society here in this Commonwealth. So that's around the Commonwealth, mostly based in universities. We had the first event at Hampton University in a similar format as today. And we want to look at all aspects of it. What was it that led to the overruling of Plessy versus Ferguson by that unanimous Supreme Court decision? What was the immediate reaction? Most places in Virginia and around the South, it wasn't good. But how much progress? Can we be honest about both the progress and the problems of the last 70 years? And then the most important question is, what's the next steps? The Virginia Constitution says, Kirk, you were such a great leader in education, both higher ed and K-12, but the Virginia Constitution guarantees every child a free education of high quality. So how are we doing? That was Dr. King's dream as well. So how are we doing? And if we're not doing well enough where we have equality and quality in every public school, then what do we need to do next? So that's part of the theme today. We're going to be talking primarily about higher education. We've got three great leaders that are here today, and we thought one of the ways to do is to bring all of the chambers of commerce together and have a dialogue with the leadership of Barry DuVal, who will be our moderator today, the President and CEO of the Virginia Chamber of Commerce, and talk about what do they need from the education system. What do we need to find more access to capital and mentors for young minority entrepreneurs that want to pursue the American dream? How can the chambers work together better to be able to influence the schools on things like workforce development and other things so that we can train up people, black, white, brown, to come out of the schools and have access to great jobs, great careers, or a higher education? What do we need to do better? So that's really the general theme today, and I can't wait to hear Barry and what he's going to do to lead that discussion. But first, we've got two keynote speakers who are very great public servants, have done masterful things in leading in this area, both in K-12 and higher ed for decades in their career. And I want to introduce them to you one at a time, hear some remarks from them as our keynote speakers, and then we'll launch into the panel. The first speaker is Dr. Dietra Trent. She is a hometown girl from right here from Richmond. Many of you may know her, a grad of VCU, but she is now the executive director in the White House, on the White House Initiative on Advancing Educational Equity, Excellence, and Economic Opportunity through the HBCUs. I don't know how you fit that all on one business card, but we're glad you're doing that good work in the White House. She is not a stranger at all to Virginia. She was chief of staff for the president of George Mason University, the second largest, public university in the Commonwealth, and of course served under my successor, Terry McAuliffe, as Deputy Secretary of Education, Director of Constituent Services, and then ultimately became the Secretary of education. She's a graduate of Virginia State University and holds both a master's degree and a PhD right here from Virginia Commonwealth University. So please welcome Dr. Dietra.
Good evening, everyone. It is wonderful to be home. I do want to say thank you, Governor McDonnell, for your very kind introduction, and mostly for giving me an opportunity to get out of DC. To say that I am honored by this invitation doesn't even begin to express the depth of my gratitude. I am so honored to be here. I want to thank you and Delegate McQuinn for this invitation. I also just want to thank the two of you for establishing this space for honest dialogue about race relations in Virginia. As the governor alluded to, although I'm a little bit more blunt in saying, and the hyper-vitriolic political environment that we find ourselves in today, the work of Virginians for Reconciliation has never been more important. And so both of you are very much accomplished in all that you've done through the legislature, through your work in state government as governor and attorney general, but I will say that I believe that one of your greatest legacies is going to be this Virginians for Reconciliation. It is appropriate for this time, and I just want to, on behalf of Virginia, but also just thank you, because I honestly often really cringe at what I hear, and it's so to be here and to be a part of this, I would not have missed it. So thank you so very much. So if you all wouldn't mind, just please help me give gratitude to two of the best public servants that Virginia has seen. Thank you so much. I also want to just thank the members of Virginians for Reconciliation. I want to thank President Rao and the VCU community for hosting this critically important conversation. And finally, thank you, President Mary DuVal and the Virginia Chamber for your sponsorship. During my time in state government, I learned that more often than not, who makes a request is more important than the actual request itself. And such was the case when Governor Tim Kaine tried to expand pre-K. And in spite of his efforts, his proposal didn't receive nearly as much support until it was added to Blueprint Virginia. So to Barry and to the Virginia Chamber, thank you for all the work that you do on behalf of our students to increase opportunity and access across the education spectrum. So thank you so very much. It is certainly befitting that we take this moment to commemorate and celebrate the progress our nation has made as a result of the landmark decision, Brown v. Board of Education, of the last 70 years. But it is also befitting that we take this moment to reflect on the critical work still needed to overcome enduring and systemic barriers to access and opportunity for many of our Black and Brown students. As one who comes from a long line of educators, including my grandmother, who also happened to be my first grade teacher, I learned about Brown v. Board at a very early age in my life. She is no longer with us, but as I began to draft this speech, I couldn't help but wonder how she would define the legacy of Brown v. Board some 70 years later. I wondered if her emotions would be mixed as mine are today. After all, we have certainly made monumental progress towards educational equity. Today, a greater percentage of Black and Brown students are graduating high school at greater numbers. A greater percentage of Black and brown students are attending and completing college. And a greater percentage of Black and brown people are moving into middle class status. Yet 7 decades later, many schools are still segregated and substantial disparities in school funding along racial lines remain. In fact, a 2022 GAO report found that a third of students went to a predominantly same race school in the 2020-2021 school year. So as we continue to look for ways to close the achievement gap and manage inequitable funding, we must also confront the ever-growing issue of resegregation of our schools. A return to segregation is a return to the original problem, separate and unequal. Not only that, we all know the data, and no one understands this better than the business community. Diversity is one of America's greatest strengths, and to deny that is to rob students of all races and all ethnic backgrounds a clear competitive edge. As Secretary of Education, I was daily confronted with the glaring reversal of the 1954 ruling. I recall an occasion where I visited an elementary school here in Richmond. The school is couched between 4 public housing communities, and its student body primarily drew from those communities. Can you imagine working in that school? The principal said the percentage of students with mental health issues ranged from 85 to 90%. And every time there was a murder in the city, it would set the entire school back 3 to 4 months. As I walked the halls of the school, I noticed a little boy named Elijah. Elijah was 6 years old. He was one of 8 children who lived with their single mother. At the time, he was the only boy and had no male figure in his life. Elijah had the biggest and brightest eyes anyone would want to see, and it lit up a room. They lit up a room. He and his siblings often walked to school since they lived so close. On their route, these kids often saw the unimaginable. Drug dealers on the corners, yellow tape marking crime, and a constant glare of flashing red lights. Things that most of us in this room only see on the news. I went over to engage him and asked his name, his grade, and if he liked school and what he wanted to be when he grew up. He said he wanted to be a fireman. As I spoke to him, I must admit my spirit became a little disheartened because I knew the data. I knew Elijah's zip code, like countless other children in America, would likely affect his life outcome. In my current role, one might question why I had mixed emotions at this moment. After all, HBCUs were originally established to educate former slaves and their descendants. These institutions exist to educate Black students. And while that might have been the case originally, the composition of the student body has changed over time. For instance, at Howard University in DC, only 1% of students identify as Black, and 32% identify as other. On the other hand, at Wingfield University in West Virginia, about 78% of our students identify as white, 9% identify as Black, and the remaining as other. Now, Howard and Bluefield are the extremes, but on average, about 25% of HBCU students identify as white. But the truth of the matter is, HBCUs are the only institutions that have always embraced diversity as a strength. Historically, Black colleges and universities have been around for nearly 2 centuries. In fact, the oldest HBCU, Cheney University, was established in 1837. That was 30 years, almost 30 years before the end of slavery, and 20 years before the Supreme Court's Dred Scott decision. Cheney was birthed during one of the most tumultuous times in U.S. history, a time when African Americans were considered chattel, 3/5 of a person, and anti-literacy laws were in full effect. Yet, in the midst of America's most atrocious and inhumane eras, Cheney prevailed and remains today. Cheney's story is the story of every HBCU in America. It is a story of pride, one that's unwavering in faith, unbreakable in spirit, and undeniably courageous, resilient, and triumphant. HBCUs have a proud history and legacy of achievement. On the yard of these institutions, major social and political movements were born. In fact, it was HBCU's graduates, including Virginia's own Oliver Hill, who litigated the landmark case some 70 years ago. And it was an HBCU graduate, Dr. Martin Luther King, who led the Civil Rights Movement, resulting in the passage of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. It was HBCU graduates Katherine Johnson, Mary Jackson, and Dorothy Bond who were the mathematical brains behind the NASA moon mission. And HBCU graduates Booker T. Washington and W.B. Du Bois, whose early stances against discrimination in education and employment eventually led to the Civil Rights Act. Although we make up only 3% of our nation's colleges and universities, we enroll 10% of college students, or about 300,000 annually. Approximately 75% of our students are Pell-eligible students, and approximately 52% are first generation. Despite long-term systemic barriers to accessing resources and opportunities, HBCUs continue to punch above their weight, generating over $50 billion in economic impact annually and nearly 150,000 jobs in the local and regional economies we serve. Likewise, we continue to graduate barrier-breaking public servants. Consider this. Of all the Black federal judges today, 80% graduated from an HBCU. Of all the Black officers in the armed forces, Black PhDs and Black doctors, 75% graduated from an HBCU. Of all the Black dentists, 70%. Of all the Black teachers, engineers, and lawyers, over 50%. Of all the Black members of Congress, 40%. HBCUs produce 25% of Black STEM graduates and nearly 50% of Black females in STEM. And last, but certainly not least, HBCUs have produced 100% of Black and female vice presidents. HBCUs have historically been underfunded. A National Academies of Sciences report found that in 2019, the federal government awarded approximately $44 billion in R&D across all institutions of higher education. Of that amount, a mere $400 million, or less than 0.5%, went to all 101 HBCUs combined. That same year, Johns Hopkins was awarded $2.4 billion. As VCU is aware, when universities receive R&D funding from the federal government, they are permitted to use sometimes 10, 20, and sometimes up to 50% towards overhead costs. 10% over a lifetime of federal and state grants buy you the best of everything. And I'm not slamming Johns Hopkins, they are indeed one of the best universities in the world. My point is, had HBCUs not been discriminated over their lifetime, they too would be great research institutions. Fortunately, this administration is taking great strides to address historic inequities. To date, we have invested over $16 billion in our nation's HBCUs, significantly more than every prior administration. As President Biden has often said, an investment in our HBCUs is an investment in our future. He understands, just as the Virginia Chamber understands, the United States cannot continue to drive global innovation and global competitiveness without diversity at the table. This administration is investing in supporting development, research, entrepreneurship, innovation from every corner of the nation. So formal segregation is gone, but too many of its legacies remain in the deep and lasting inequities we still see to this day, in our housing, in our infrastructure, and certainly in our education system. So let's not be complacent. By the 75th anniversary, I hope I will no longer have mixed emotions about Brown's legacy. I envision an education system in which schools reflect the rich diversity of our country, and every Elijah and every Eva receives a quality education where diversity is celebrated. So let's build on what Brown versus Ward made possible. Let's continue the fight in education and for equity in education. And let's raise the bar in education so all students can count on accessing the doors education can open for them. We owe them, and we can do it, and together we will. Thank you again so much for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Trent. That was outstanding. Our next keynote speaker is Speaker Kirk Cox. Kirk and I have been friends for 35 years or so. When I first began to serve in the legislature in '92, he became a mentor and a friend, and I was just blessed to learn so much from him in those early days as a legislator. He's a career teacher that spent 35 years or so before his current job teaching young children in the classroom in Colonial Heights. Spent 32 years in the Virginia General Assembly, the highest ranking positions, including his last two as Speaker of the Virginia House of Delegates. And I can say that during my time as governor, every time I needed something big done, especially in higher education, K-12, the phone call went to Kirk Cox, because I knew Kirk had a heart for knowing how to get things done, and more importantly, he knew the inside and outside of every classroom in higher ed and K-12, and knew how to solve the problem with good policy suggestions. Kirk is a graduate of James Madison University, like our chairman of the panel, Barry DuVal, and also has an undergraduate degree from William & Mary. As I've mentioned, when I went to do reforms to come up with new funding formulas and more degrees, more degree attainment programs in higher education, I turned to Kirk, and in a remarkable miracle of bipartisanship, Kirk led the way in 2011 to get 140 out of 140 votes in the Virginia General Assembly for the Virginia Top Jobs Higher Education Act, and it was an extraordinary accomplishment. He's now the president of the Virginia Higher Education Business Roundtable, and just delighted Kirk is here. Kirk?
Well, I can't thank my good friend Bob McDonnell enough for that really nice introduction, and Dolores McQuinn is a wonderful person. And the thing they both have in common is their faith. And that just guides everything. I admire them so much. So, we're being honest today, and I'm going to be really honest. I'm retired now, I can say this. As you know, when you speak, I give a lot of speeches, you're always looking who's going to speak in front of you. And let's be honest, you're hoping they're not very good. Because if they're really good, you look terrible by comparison. So I've known Dietra a long time, and I go, great. Just great. Dietra Trent's in front of me. Thanks a lot. So please bear in mind that I'm going to do my best. I'm going to do something a little bit different. I think Dietra did such a great job, and from a perspective I just don't have of laying out the history. I will say this, it was really interesting. I did teach for 30 years, and I grew up in a fairly segregated society. And my first teaching assignment was Peabody Middle School in Petersburg, Virginia. And you're talking about, an experience, and I loved it. It was It was an incredible experience, and it really taught me things I've never been taught. And I will say this in a positive standpoint. Talking about bad facility, you were scared to go outside. It was just very, very tough. And I do think where we come from, that is amazing. So here's the little bit different thing I'm going to do. I'm going to talk a little bit more about next steps, because I'm going to focus on one or two things that I think were sort of game changers, especially in, I think, making sure students, minority businesses really get a leg up. So that's what I'm going to try to do for you today. So I'm a teacher. You get slides. Used to get handbags, now you get slides. So let me see if I can make the slides work. All right, that didn't work. Might need the tech guy. Now, y'all are really good. Now, the lesson you learned here is, say if you got 30 high school and middle school students, and this happens, you're really in trouble. Because they revolt. And you're just sitting there calmly. So, you can see that. There you go.
Affordable talent pathways are all about.
All right. So to jump too much. So let's see. So, okay, I'll just use this.
We're going to be able to develop.
Give me a second.
Behold.
Here's the good news on lab. So when I first started teaching, remember we had the film projectors? And when they broke, you were absolutely dead. Go back to the beginning. Get started. Okay, here we go. So, Governor Don did a great job to mispronounce our name. Everyone mispronounces our name. We're at VBHEC, the Virginia Business Higher Education Council. It's an absolute mouthful. And I want to tell you a little bit about us very quickly. Look at the top line. Our focus really right now is on internships and affordable talent pathways. I don't think there's anything bigger, and I'm going to talk about that you can do right now for first-gen kids, et cetera, than that. But we're a leader in higher education and advocate a range of innovative higher ed funding policies. So our branding campaign is called Growth for Virginia. You can sort of see our 4 areas of focus: talent, affordability, innovation, and opportunity.
Affordable talent pathways are all about opportunity and equity. There's no more important thing that you can do for a young, first generation, low income, or underrepresented student than to give them practical experience and access to employers who will work with them.
The internship opportunities have elevated me to a level I didn't think I'd reached. The stuff I've learned, I'll carry with me as I grow into my career and as I grow as an individual.
It allowed me to push aside what other people thought I was, and it allowed me to become more than what they ever thought I was going to be.
So that's a video that I think really sort of sums up what I'm trying to say today. So I'm looking at the agenda, and so what can we do more to move the needle practically? And I would say it's affordable talent pathways.
Affordable.
There we go. So this is going to be a long thing. So what are affordable talent pathways? They sort of have 4 keys to them. First of all, you've got to align the curriculum between colleges and businesses. Second, you have to have, I think, very good paid internships. And please notice I said paid. Because if you are a black, brown, first generation kid, you're going to have to go home and work. Okay? You're going to have to support yourself. You're not going to be able to take an unpaid internship. And you're not going to get that experience you need. So pay is absolutely key. They got to be affordable for everyone. And they don't do any good if they don't lead to full-time employment. So we at VBHEC, and I'm going to brag on Gary in a second, the Chamber, and also Chev, have really come up with this big goal. So every student who attends Virginia College and university will have the opportunity for at least one paid internship and the field of study with that, extending the time it takes to complete their degree. Now, Dolores will tell you this, politicians love polls, okay? And so when I go visit politicians, I make sure I take polls so I can look at Betsy Carr too. And so, and actually get this presentation, some of this presentation from Betsy. But that's a pretty audacious goal if you look at it. But I want you to look at the left-hand side and how basically that polls. You can read it for yourself. But we probably asked 60 questions. The only thing that polls better than internships and funding internships was veterans. And so I think that's really cool. So I'm going to ask you a question. How many of you had an internship or some kind of work-based experience that was really meaningful for you? It's funny, I go into a lot of audiences, and frankly, I have two responses to that. I could have y'all stand up and you could tell really incredible stories which make my speech much better. The sad part is some of the people that didn't raise their hand is one of the reasons I think it's the most important thing we can do. So I'll give you a little Kirk Cox story. 30-year school teacher. You would not imagine a first-year school teacher walking into a classroom without a practicum and a very, very intense student teaching experience. So why should you do that in any other field? Yeah. So I'll tell you my little example. One of my loves in teaching was to get students who were doing practicums or student teaching and have them in my classroom for a semester. Because the way teaching works is, if you don't have a first good 2 weeks, and I'm not exaggerating, the year is over. If you lose control of your classroom, you can't make that up. And I look at Jim Dyke as my baseball analogy. You know, you get down 6-0 the first inning, it's really, really difficult. And so here's a really tough example. One of the things I wanted to teach them was how important my subject was. And I'm going to get to Brown in a second. And so I did something the first day that I thought was pretty unique. You remember the first day. You get 35 forms. The kids' eyes glaze over. Students are students, so they're catching up over the summer, and you spend the entire day doing that and you've lost the class. So I figured out a way to do that in 5 minutes. And then I did a simulation. It was a tough simulation, a really difficult simulation. I give them the background on what that current president is doing. And then at the end of the background, I would say, we're in a crisis situation. The president's been shot, you're vice president. You've got 15 minutes to decide what to do. And you only have one clue, and that was there were 3 gunmen and they were using Russian-made weapons. So it's very interesting. So I would then sort of look at the kids, and they're terrified. And I go, who would like to volunteer? And they're all staring at their feet, because that's what kids do when they're in college. And so I would, I'd pick on the most innocent-looking kid. And make a long story short, I'd send them out of the classroom. And I would say to the other students, you're the press. Okay, so you've got questions on your desk. So after they do their little 5-minute spiel, ask them a question. So don't forget you're the press. I'll introduce the vice president. So I have the kid walk in, I go to the vice president of the United States. So they stand up, they got that right. You know, the next thing they do, they start clapping and cheering because they feel sorry for them. And I say to them, that is awful. It's the free press. It's the First Amendment. You're not cheerleaders. This is not a football game. Stand. You've already won it. But to make a long story short, inevitably the student would stand up and accuse the Russians off that one piece of evidence. He would start World War III. And then I would have the first question asked, so I'd call on the kid in the audience, and he would stand up and they would say, Jake Smith, CNN. This is hard. Mr. Vice President, how do you think the 25th Amendment affects this situation? So you can imagine the student would 12th grade cover. 25th. So then they go, I don't know. And then I go, well, you're done. You've trained 40, 45, 50 years for this position. You're the second most powerful position in the free world. People are looking at you for comfort, for direction, for leadership. There are 27 of them. And you don't know the one that deals with disability or president. And then I went on to say, not only will you learn the 27 amendments in the founding documents, but we're going to be talking about landmark cases, like Brown versus Board of Education that was overturned, or it was overturned plus it. And you've got to have the ability, okay, as a really good citizen, to absorb that and be able to debate that. So that's a little bit too long, but that's sort of my why I think it's so important. And I think in every field it's that way. So, and I'm going to go quickly through this. So I really want to emphasize how much you can sort of see how much support this has in the polling data. And notice, especially for first-gen kids, and you can look at a lot of these slides I've sort of picked, but people really want to see this, and I think that's the encouraging news. Okay, they just don't want to see it for everyone. So, and I'm going to click through these pretty quickly. But one thing you learn as a teacher, let the student read. But you can sort of see also where economically distressed. And notice the question is interesting. Would you be more or less likely to vote for a candidate if they did this? So when I go visit both Republicans and Democrats, I say, this is because we talk about bipartisan, what can we work on together? And one of the things that I try to do, not always successful in the General Assembly, there's so many key issues that both sides can work on in a bipartisan manner that they really want to. And I think this is one of them. Now the HBCU number, because Dietra did such a great job on that, that's encouraging and not encouraging. Okay, 62% is good, should be much, much better. And my interesting story on that is I represented Virginia State both when I got in and when I didn't get in. At a fantastic university. But here's what's cool. My mother got her master's from there. Every recertification course I ever took was from there. And my brother now is on the adjunct faculty there. So just don't believe Kirk Cox. Strata Education Foundation has a really good state opportunity index. A lot of you remember Stephen Murray when Stephen was at BDP. And he is passionate across all 50 states that mentoring, coaching, paid internships, talent pathways are going to be the game changer. And so notice this slide's on underemployment. So you got your 4-year degree, okay, but you're underemployed. Overall, 52% of grants, the terminal BABS, are underemployed a year after graduation. And of course, you can look and see what that causes in 2 and 3. But what I really want to focus in on is the last 2 points. With my bad eyes, I'm going to try to read them. College level employment rates are higher for those who complete an internship. Controlling for other factors, the odds of underemployment for grads who had an internship are nearly 50% lower, you can see. And look at institutional type, race, ethnicity, gender, and geography matter with respect to post-graduation occupational incomes. But typically, not as much at your college major or internships. So I'm stealing Barry's thunder. I want to brag on him a little bit, so I'll put this up. Dietra mentioned Blueprint Virginia 2030, which I think has led the way. And the Chamber has so many issues they deal with. But if you look at that slide, and especially the recommendations in 2030, so much whether it be HBCUs or STEM or higher ed, but they've led by example. They've been probably the biggest partner in internships. They're the most powerful business organization, not just, in all of the various chambers. And they understand this, I think, as well as anyone understands this. And if we're going to be successful, we've got to have people like the chamber do that. So just sort of a shout out to them. And I stole Barry's best line. Barry always uses the 90% line, so I'm not going to actually read it, so you can read it with the rest of the presentation. So, sort of finishing up, why are affordable pathways so important? A little bit more on this. You can sort of read through that, the first 3. I mean, obviously the practical learning, I think, is absolutely everything. But it's what employers say on the bottom 3. Top recruiting strategy for employers. If you view it as employers, it's the most influential thing they have in tough hiring decisions. And 97% of business leaders support expansion of work-based learning. So I kept saying I want to be practical. So what have we done? And a lot of thanks to the Betsy's and the Dolores McQuins. We got $26.5 million. And that's not budget dust. That's a big number in the current budget. And I probably shouldn't have put we are well on our way. I think we're making good progress. So what are we doing? Internship centers, places on campus where a student and a business can go where they know that's all that place is doing, is trying to match them up. Small business matching grants. They're more small business than any other kind of business. So if you're looking to get an intern, small business a lot of times can't afford them, and they don't have the mentoring ability. This is already up and running. I don't even know this. A small business right now can get $7,500 in matching grants for an intern. And so the goal eventually is to have 1,000, 4,000, and more businesses. Business and student modules that train those businesses and students on internships, major marketing and branding campaign, housing, transportation, mentoring for students. We did 7 roundtables across Virginia. And we had students, number one. We had higher ed faculty, we had businesses. We had about every one of those roundtables. We went from Abington to Hampton Roads. And one of the best ones was at Norfolk State, led by Dr. J. What was really interesting is every student at every one of those said, you know, Mr. Cox, that's the biggest problem we have. It's housing, transportation, and mentoring for students, because it's nice that we have an internship, but a lot of us don't have a car, and this is even shocking me. I thought I'd been around a lot. We don't have a driver's license. And so it's interesting that on the small business matching grants, that small business can get money for housing, transportation, and mentoring for students, which I think is really cool. And so I'm finishing up. There are really some cool models out there, like the Blue Ridge Partnership in Roanoke. They have figured out the healthcare industry basically to work with every K-12, every higher ed institution, every single healthcare business, and map out what jobs they need in the next 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. And I think that's the type of thing we need. And Norfolk State University has, and so does Virginia State, has some great initiatives. Dr. J has a presidential internship where she personally sort of runs and things of that nature. So I'm going to finish up with one more little short video clip. You're going to recognize these people. And I think it's really cool because it's going to be very bipartisan, and you're going to see government leaders talking about this as a big initiative. So I'll leave you with this. I think if we can focus on things like this in the future, we can really be game changers. So I'll play the video and then I'll shut up. Hopefully I can make the video work this time.
We're going to be able to develop curriculums and programs around the needs of the workforce. There's a program we have down in Hampton Roads between Norfolk State University and Virginia State University that's going to create more healthcare professionals. And so as best we can collaborate, I think we produce a better outcome in terms of our workforce.
Starting the internship opportunities is to get students to understand that you don't have to leave the state. You may not necessarily go back to your hometown, but you don't have to leave the Commonwealth to stay and live and thrive.
I think companies want the best talent, and the best talent is usually a diverse workforce. We bring a lot of experiences, we bring a lot of expertise, we bring a lot of productivity, and so they're choosing Virginia. I think they'll continue to do that as long as we stay on the path that we're on and continue to be an inclusive, welcoming Commonwealth.
The race for talent is on. I'm so encouraged by the work that the BBHEC and their partners are doing to give every Virginian the opportunity to excel. An impactful internship can be the first step in a long-lasting career and a critical opportunity for students to learn outside the classroom. I am thrilled to celebrate the progress we are making to ensure that Virginia's next generation enters the workforce ready for success.
Thank y'all.
Boy, very encouraging close there with those videos, Kirk. Thank you for that. Now we're ready for the panel discussion. Let me just say, those of you that are interested in the work of Virginians for Reconciliation, you go to virginiansforreconciliation.com. We'd love to have you participate. We have monthly meetings. We have a lot of activities. please join if you're interested in this. Help us be part of the solution and not continue to have part of these problems here in America. So thank you. So my last introduction is the president of the Virginia Chamber of Commerce, Barry DuVal. Barry's had a long-standing career in public service on the Newport News City Council, became mayor of the city of Newport News, went into the administration of Governor Gilmore as the Secretary of Commerce and Trade. Just did a terrific job helping Governor Gilmore create jobs and opportunity for so many people, and then a number of years ago became the CEO of the Chamber, and the growth that he's ushered in from 1,000 members to 29,000 members during his tenure is just extraordinary because of his leadership, his character, his integrity. He's a man of faith, and I can't think of a better person to be the moderator of this panel. We have several other leaders of the Chambers of Commerce, from the Asian Chamber, the Hispanic Chamber, the Black Chamber, and then a former Secretary of Education. So I'm looking forward to this, and so please welcome Barry DuVal.
While the panel's coming up, let me just say a few thank yous. It's great for me to be here. I know it's Friday at 5. I want to thank you all for being here. Aware of the time, I was Secretary of Commerce for 4 years, and I will tell you the story while my panel's coming up. It was Friday at 5. I was supposed to close out a conference, and I was in another city, and the state plane had to pick me up and drive me to Roanoke, and I went to the conference center, and I came in the back. It was really crowded. There was no seat. The panel was finishing, and I was supposed to close out the conference, so I slipped in the back row, and this fellow looked over at me, and he was kind of wiping his brow, and he was squirming in his seat. He looked over at me, he said, "Sir, are you going to stay to the bitter end of this thing?" I said, "Sir, I am the bitter end of this thing. I would appreciate it if you stayed." And he said, "Well, all right, since you're speaking, I'll stay." I'm happy to be here to support this reconciliation initiative, and I want to thank Dolores Quinn, the delegate, for her public service, and Governor McDonnell for his. Just a couple of things on a personal note. From 1990 to 96, I served as the mayor of an urban city. We had 33,000 students in our school system. 33% of them were African American, and 90% of them were east of Mercury Boulevard. So it's just a long city, and it's very narrow, and 90% of the African American community live east of Mercury Boulevard, down near the shipyard. And I engaged in this process to and how we could bring a diverse city together, because it was very much a divided city along racial and economic lines. And I engaged in this with who just stepped down, Dr. Price. He's head of the school system. He was Mayor Price for a long time. We created this organization called People to People. And out of that, what we realized is that we needed to engage the community. And I was really pleased to be the mayor to fund and start the Achievable Dream program, which was a program, and is a program that is significant success and spread to other parts of the Commonwealth. We also were able to build the first middle school and the first high school east of Mercury Boulevard in 60 years. That work continues to this day. And I had to learn as a 30-year-old mayor how to engage with the community, and there was no way to do it other than to be there and to participate one-on-one, and sometimes me and 200 people in a room, and I was learning and listening and coming up with solutions. The mayor of Richmond during that time was a guy named Tim Kane, and he and I worked together on a lot of urban initiatives and continue to work together today. I'm excited about this panel, and I'm going to ask them to use their handheld mics to introduce themselves. I'm going to ask a few questions, but I think all that has been said needs to be said regarding some of the importance of the ruling and some of the importance of the impact on individuals' lives and the work still yet to be done. But we have business representatives here, I think, can talk about how the business community has responded, how the business community has been impacted, and how the business community can do more in the future to help create a prosperous opportunity for everybody. So with that, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and just the organization and how long they've been there. I'll say something about Jim Dyke representing many different roles, but he has chaired our Chamber Education Blueprint Committee, so I asked him as a business leader and as a past Secretary of Education, but he holds many other roles too. But Tanner, why don't I start with you and we'll go around.
Just want to make sure it's working. Hi everyone, my name is Phan. I'm the founder and the chairman of the Virginia Asian Chamber of Commerce. We were organized in 2004, and today, as you know, we've been in 21 years in business. We have been helping Asian American business, but now for the past 10 years, anybody from any communities need our help. They walk in and we always help them. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jim Dyke. I'm a senior advisor at McGuire Woods Consulting after having been a partner at the law firm of McGuire Woods for 20 years. I've had the privilege of serving in a number of capacities in Virginia, including the State Board of Education, Secretary of Education, on the State Council of Higher Education. As Barry mentioned, I also have been involved with the Chamber through its Blueprint effort. I also serve on the board of Norfolk State University, so behold all those Norfolk State graduates out there. And one other little added point based on Barry's introduction is that he mentioned Achievable Dream, which is a great, terrific program. And I'm proud to say, when I served as Secretary of Education under Governor Wilder, after a persuasive argument from you and Alan Diamondstein and a couple other folks, we put the first state money into Achievable Dream.
That's right.
And it has been such a huge success. And thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Michel Zajur. I'm President and CEO of the Virginia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Founded the Virginia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce back in 2000 to help Hispanic entrepreneurs and our partners build a more robust, stronger, more diverse business community in the state of Virginia. Thank you.
Great afternoon. I thought the gentleman was going to have the ladies go first. My name is Charmaine. I serve as the Managing Director with the Central Virginia African American Chamber of Commerce. There we have our mission to build the economic opportunities and development for the African American community and businesses within our region. So very proud to be able to serve here with my friends, chamber members, our chambers here on the panel. Looking forward to this discussion.
We've thought about some questions in advance. I am going to stay to those topics, so not to surprise my panelists. But I want to go back to May 15th of this year. May 15th was the 100-year anniversary of the State Chamber of Commerce. Some of you participated in a celebration of that, and it was my privilege to work with a number of great board members to put that event together. We honored 4 citizens for their Lifetime Achievement Award, and one of them is here today, and I'm so excited that Jim Dyke was able to join us. He was one of the 4 citizens that received the Lifetime Achievement Award for many things. And I would like to ask Jim the first question to just answer this question. Some people don't know how the business community impacted the ending of massive resistance. Some people aren't aware of that history. You gave a brief overview of that and then the impact on your life, and I think it might help set the stage because you will hear from Jim a little bit about that, and it was actually written about in the Richmond Times not too far after that May 15th. So Jim, let me put you on the spot and tell you to give the abbreviated version of that story, because I think it goes to how long the business community has been engaged in and what the business community at large has been doing in this space.
Well, thank you. To be precise, the event was held at the Jefferson Hotel. And when I accepted the award, I pointed out the fact, after having talked about a few issues that Barry and I had worked together on over the years, that in that very hotel, 66 years ago, 29 business leaders from around Virginia, including members of the State Chamber of Commerce, came together to meet with then Governor Allman to tell him he needed to take steps to end the abomination of massive resistance. Because not only was it wrong from a human perspective, but from a business perspective, it did not make sense because it impacted Virginia's ability to grow its economy, to develop a talented workforce, and to be the best possible Commonwealth it could be.
Thank you for sharing that. And the commitment is still there today for the State Chamber of Commerce and business leaders. I want to mention to you that we in Virginia have been very fortunate to be recognized as a top state for business during Governor McDonnell's term, and recently, July 11th, we were recognized as the top state for business again in the United States of America. We know, because we focus on this very strategically, to be the top state for business, we have to be the top state for talent. And in order to be the top state for talent, we cannot allow any of our people to be left behind. We have to bring everybody along in an equal and a way that provides opportunity for them as individuals. And our business community is stronger because of it. And so you'll see, as Kirk mentioned, our blueprint that we present to every incoming governor, usually in the December summit after the election. We present that blueprint for the last 3 governors. We would very much like for you to look at our blueprint online, vachamber.com. And what you're going to see in this last blueprint was a commitment to diversity and a commitment to inclusion, because the business community across the Commonwealth believe that it's important to put that in our blueprint. And so you'll see that in the blueprint we presented to Governor Youngkin. These business leaders themselves are equally committed to that. And I want to ask them, and I'll start with you, Charmaine, and ask you, Charmaine, to talk a little bit about some of the steps the business community can take or has taken from your observation to address this legacy of segregation, but also wrap in observations you have about how we can continue to enhance access to quality education in underrepresented areas.
Okay. I was also an educator for 10 years prior to this, and one of the things I focused on was career technical education. So I was in the business field, teaching students business, and one of the things I loved, and I think I saw a lot of it as Kirk was sharing his presentation and Dietra was sharing, is making sure that there are more mentorships and the internships. We had a program at that point where in high school, the students, they would partner with businesses to make sure that they were receiving real world experience, so they could put the certifications which are required into play, and they could understand how that was connected to the actual workplace. Because a lot of times students they hear the information in the classroom, but until they put it into a practical sense, they're kind of like, okay, how does this come into play? And so internships, mentorships, making sure that that businesses are being proactive and going into the schools and doing, we had like our career days, and making sure that they are staying connected in that way so that students in education can see that diversity in the workforce, diverse teams coming in from businesses, and it can set the stage and give them a vision of hope and how to have a brighter future.
Very nice. Michel, let me ask you to think about addressing the same topic regarding some of the ways you've seen the business community integrate diverse workers into the workplace, some of the best examples that you've seen, and some of the things you're doing to connect your members and services you provide.
Yes, I think specifically a very growing Hispanic community here. When I started the chamber, well, my background, I'm from Mexico. My parents came here. They didn't speak English. So when going to school, it was challenges because it didn't address a lot of my needs. My wife, Lisa, who's there, she worked with Richmond Public Schools and other school systems, helping them learn the language and the culture for the teachers to better help the students. And so she came to me and said, we got to do something. These teachers can't address the issue. So we work with businesses and going to the schools. We started a mentor program. We go to the schools. We bring leaders, business leaders, to be mentors, so they can see people like them that came here with the same experience. That when I came here, I didn't speak English, and it has been very transforming to a lot of these kids that they can relate. In Richmond Public Schools, they have a 60% dropout among Latinos, and we know we need a workforce. We need a talented workforce, and yet, City of Richmond, 60% dropout among Latinos. So we're trying to address this with this program, Passport to Education, and working with businesses to help this so no one falls behind, because the train doesn't arrive to the station till the caboose is there. And so education is a key element that we're trying to, and we work in the community to do through the foundation.
That's great. You're doing great work, and thank you for that. Let's talk a little bit about the Asian American Chamber of Commerce, some of the things that you're doing and that you've seen to integrate your community into the business community, some of the examples that your organization is working at.
Thank you, Barry. Before I'm going to talk about the Asian American community, I'd like to thank our brothers and sisters in African American community who dare to stand up for the change that we want to make sure everybody in the African American community to hear this. You have done such a strong change for not only one community, but all communities, and we'd like you to realize that we are very grateful, very, very grateful to what you've done. Thank you so very much. The Brown family versus the Board of Education was done in 1954. I was 9 years old, and that's when I left North Vietnam to the South Vietnam for freedom. Then, of course, again, 1975, I left South Vietnam for the United States of A. Look at those, how precious our freedom is. Look at those who dare to stand up for our belief. And that changed the Asian American and inspired the Asian American to stand up, to talk more, to defend their rights for the equality and justice for all. Why I'm saying that to you, as you know that we have 36 countries in Asia. Some of them don't even talk to each other. But because of that inspiration, it makes a change that we are not anymore laying back. We want to stand up and we talk about our rights and our justice. We have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. We have to work together. Why? Because as you can see that our younger generations can be damaged if we don't work together. I remember back in the old time, you remember Joan Rivers? She said, "Can we talk?" That is what we need to get back together. Can we talk? And I use that all the time. And I ask everyone to please, can we talk? Thank you.
Talk a little bit about the African American business community and the work that you're doing and how you've seen the impact grow since Brown's decision and some of the services you all have provided.
Okay. So with the Central Virginia African American Chamber of Commerce, the decision with Brown v. Board was pivotal because as a little girl with Linda Brown being a little girl and not being able to go to the school that was closer to her because of the color of her skin, this whole decision allowed for, it broke all of it broke just that barrier to just start the process of desegregating not just the schools, but also the businesses and communities as time to come. And of course, again, we have a lot of work to do. So right now with the African American Chamber, our goal is to make sure that Black businesses, African American businesses, have a seat at the table. And that is so important because there are opportunities that it just seems as though it's so easy to get overlooked. And you have to just continue to fight for what should be obvious, but the obvious seems to get blinded. There are blinders to the obvious. So one of the things that we do, we have our Black Business Accelerator program, and we make sure that we're bringing expert leaders and business leaders to the table. We bring in people like from the marketing agency, from different banks, to make sure that business owners in our region have the opportunity to get the education that's needed to know what it takes to get funding, what it takes to make sure, make sure their organization is developed with their human resources and to make sure that the marketing and things are coming to play. They're touching bases with people that they would not ordinarily be in front of. We're giving them the opportunity to have a seat at the table by being involved in large projects like the Diamond District project, building a new baseball stadium. And so those are the types of things that we want to make sure that African American businesses, but we're also bringing in our fellow chambers to engage in. And so behind the scenes, I'm seeing where the fight is. We have to be so persistent in that fight. But that's what our cause is.
That's great. Well done. And Michel, talk a little bit about the Brown decision regarding the Hispanic community. What are some of your observations of the evolution of the decision and how it's impacted the Hispanic community and some of the activities today?
Yes, I think really that decision has really opened it up, like Tinh said, that we are more accepting and really understanding diversity, the importance of it. I think on my note, when I started the chamber in 2000, there wasn't other kind of chambers. It was the first chamber in Virginia that kind of identified different. And I didn't want to start something that was dividing people because I really think we need to work together. But I did realize that just like when my father came here, someone helped him open a business, and we needed to help people up the ladder. And doing it in language and culture and the camaraderie that you have the understanding of their backgrounds is very, very important. And I went to see the president of the Richmond Chamber. I didn't want to start something. He encouraged me, it was Jim Dunn, to start this. And I think it's really important. But I also see it's important to work together. I know with Virginia Union University, we're working to help them not only be a Black serving institution, but a Hispanic serving institution. There's over 500 Hispanic serving institutions in the United States. There's only one in Virginia, Marymount. And I'm on the State College Community College Board. I'm trying to get Northern Virginia Community College to that level. And I want to get Virginia Union because it opens them up to more resources. But I think working together is so important. The work the Virginia Chamber does is incredible, and I just hands off to you. And you're very inclusive in everything you do, Barry. But Blueprint Virginia is so important. But I think it's working together. But I think we all have our niche to help up people up the ladder.
Thank you. We have, you've heard Blueprint Virginia again. I referenced our website. We had the opportunity to present this concept to our board when I first came in, which was the business community really needs to focus on areas of importance to our economic competitiveness. we really need to endorse ideas and not candidates. And I was able to get our executive committee and our full board to lead in on endorsing ideas and not candidates. What that has allowed us to do over the last 14 and a half years is to have an impact on issues across party lines, to work on issues of competitiveness. I want to thank Dr. Trent for not only being here today, but the great service she's provided to Virginia, and now how proud we are that you're providing this to our nation. But she mentioned something about including blueprint in our first blueprint, the importance of early childhood education. That's what she was referencing. And once we included it in the blueprint and presented it in 2013, we saw significant bipartisan support. Early childhood education was no longer looked at as some sort of social program for a certain sector. It just allowed us to cross the political divide as a business community, raise the issue as making sure we knew what our workforce was going to be 20 years from now by investing in early childhood. And I've seen the growth in funding and the strength of it in Virginia, and I attribute that to those who have been the champions of that important cause. But we just simply put it in the blueprint and advocated for it. And I will say, the blueprint needs to be updated in 2025 because it's ever evolving. And by the way, folks, we elect a new governor every 48 months in Virginia. Some of you probably know that. Yeah. We never get to reward the existing governor, or we don't get to hold them accountable, but we always elect a new governor every 48 months, so we have to keep updating this blueprint. Jim, let me turn to you. You're an educator, a business person who's led education. You have a perspective of the business community that you have been in for so long. Would love for you to talk just a little bit about how the business community has been impacted by Brown and the decision, and some of these facts that we've heard today, the contributions that Dietra talked about with HBCUs, what you've seen even in the Virginia HBCUs. How's the business community been impacted in the last 70 years?
Well, let me put it in a little perspective. I mentioned earlier what I told the chamber about the importance of making sure that we impacted and address the need for diversity in the Commonwealth and the role that the business community can play, just as they played a significant role 66 years ago. I ended my comments by saying there's still a lot of vestiges of that massive resistance in Virginia, and the business community must step up now and address those vestiges. And to put that in some perspective, we're all very pleased, obviously, with the Brown decision, but the reality of the situation was Brown versus Board of Education did say that separate but unequal was not acceptable, and we had to integrate the schools. But in order to get a unanimous decision, they had to basically leave it at that. They did not address the question of how you implement that. We then subsequently had the Brown 2 decision, which came up with the phrase, move forward with all deliberate speed. And we all know what that meant, which was more foot dragging. And we still, as I think Dietra alluded to, we have probably a larger number of segregated schools in Virginia now than we had 10 years ago. And one of the reasons, and this is where I think the business community can step up and implement it, some changes that would have an impact, is that 20 years after the Brown decision, the Supreme Court came up with another decision. It was called Milliken versus Bradley. And in that case, it grew out of Detroit. And what the court was trying to do there was to basically bring the suburbs in around Detroit to help them end segregation in the schools by being able to move students around. And the Supreme Court stopped that. The reason that is important, and this gets back to the blueprint, because for the first time in the blueprint, Barry included a specific section on housing. And one of the key points in that was, and Richmond is a perfect example, there are two ways of building wealth in our country: home ownership and education. And Virginia's history in both of those areas is abysmal. Because in the housing area, we basically segregated housing, and you alluded to the fact in Newport News, for example, that the black community lived in a certain part of the city. Dietra mentioned it when she talked about the schools. The point is, if the housing is segregated, you cannot have an integrated school, because most people want to go to school somewhere in their neighborhood. And we have got to attack housing and make sure that we open it up and to have more attainable housing in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Now, we've worked on a report that talks about some specific things that can be done. And I think the business community, as I said, Barry mentioned it in the blueprint, is that we have got to get the General Assembly to basically take some steps to have some accountability to see what our localities are doing as far as providing what I refer to as attainable housing. That's housing that not only would address the vestiges of segregation, but it would also provide attainable housing for teachers, for first responders, for contractors, for people who cannot afford to live in neighborhoods where they work. And this is a solution that not only will address the remnants of Brown, but it would serve the community as a whole. But the business community needs to step up and say, this is something that needs to be done. Because it's also, quite frankly, it's workforce housing. And that's Virginia. If Virginia wants to stay as the top state for business, it's going to have to do more to provide workforce housing. Because, for example, North Carolina, we've got a lot of folks leaving Virginia to go to North Carolina because they can afford the housing, and they can't afford it in Virginia. Yeah. So that's where the business community can step up and work with our legislators and the governor to say, you have to take these steps. Because not only is it the right thing to do, but it is the business right thing to do, because we will then be able to prepare our future workforce who will become employed, become taxpayers, grow our economy, and keep us as the #1 state in the nation for business.
I say amen to that. That's a very good point. Say that we do have over 30,000 members now. I meet with CEOs around the state. Every region, the CEOs are talking to me about this issue. And for the first time, if you look at the demographics of the Commonwealth, we are losing population in Northern Virginia. We are losing population in Northern Virginia. Even though the jobs are there, people are moving out of Northern Virginia, and those companies are finding they have to recruit in other parts of the Commonwealth because of housing. I was talking to an employer in Northern Virginia that has 20,000 employees, and their #1 issue is housing today. And that was last week. So I want to say we'll be updating our blueprint. Housing is going to be an important part of it, and we have to find a solution, and I think we can do it in Virginia and lead the way. Thank you for bringing that up. I'm going to move towards what we call in my conferences the lightning round. This is sort of the last question. Everybody gets to say whatever they want. I'm going to ask the question, but they're going to get to weigh in on what they view as the pathway for the future. And I want all of you to think about. Jim mentioned housing, and we mentioned some other things, but I'm going to start over here and ask you if, you know, in the few moments we have left, as it relates to this opportunity for inclusion and growing together, what are some of the things your organization would like to be doing, and how would you like to partner with the business community and people in this room, and what can we do to help you reach your organization's goals? And what do you think some of the things the business community can be doing to be more effective? And essentially, Michel, I'm going to go down the line and ask each of you the same question. So why don't you begin?
Okay.
Thank you.
I think continue to have conversations. That is the biggest thing. Outside, off the stage, off the stage conversations, making sure that we're working together towards equality. Making sure that we are putting businesses out there or advocating for good policies, and making sure that the people that's behind the businesses are operating in integrity. Our policymakers are operating in integrity because we always want to make sure they're good people to help us to continue to get in good trouble. We want to make sure that, and that as far as education goes, making sure that we come together to decide or to just kind of collaborate and see what we need to do within the education field, elementary, primary, secondary, and higher education. All of those things are important. It's important to the Black and brown community. One of the last things I'll say is I went to a predominantly white institution for higher education. And I remember at that time, I had an amazing experience. It was just the one time, there had to be that one time that I was overlooked. And that moment was changing for me because I was working at the Multicultural Center, making sure that on campus, equality and fairness was there. And then when it comes to your front door, and you don't expect it, but you do expect it. you kind of like, you know what? I'm going to be more persistent in this matter to make sure that the generations behind me not only get the opportunity for quality education, not only, and it's not, I feel like we want to make sure we address not just those who are making sure underserved. We want to make sure that those who are in underserved areas are getting the resources and they are treated just as well as those in affluent areas. And there is a lot of red tape and red lines that are everywhere that we as business owners can continue to make sure that we are speaking up about, because those, the red tape, red lines affect the education, which in turn does affect our workforce. And so we just want to make sure that we continue to have this conversation off the stage.
Very good, thank you.